Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. For more information about the Moffitt Method speed, strength, and conditioning programs, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Our amazing guest today is Coach Brad Minter, Associate Director of Sports Performance for Football at Boise State University. Prior to his arrival in Boise, Coach Minter served in similar roles at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette and Virginia Tech. Prior to his time in Blacksburg, Coach Minter worked at Mercer University, where he was a strength and conditioning graduate assistant. At Mercer, he designed and conducted daily training programs for men's and women's soccer and track and field, while assisting with football and multiple other sports. Coach Minter has also gained valuable knowledge and experience working in a pair of Southeastern Conference weight rooms. The Hueytown, Alabama native began his collegiate coaching career at South Carolina, where he worked directly with the Gamecocks football program before headed to Baton Rouge. In addition to working with football, Coach Minter also assisted the men's and women's basketball programs, tennis, golf, volleyball, softball, and baseball. Coach Minter earned his degree in health sciences from Furman University in 2017, where he played linebacker and defensive end for the Paladins. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
I appreciate you for having me on, Coach. It's definitely an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you very much, Brad, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So I know time is short, so we'll get right to the questions. Of course, I'm sure we'll have a few jokes and funny stories to tell later on, but let's get to it. So everyone's journey and motivation are different. At what point in your life did you know that you wanted to become a strength and conditioning coach, and why?
Yeah, so obviously like playing football for, pretty much all of my life. I had a lot of influences that have been very good, as far as coaching goes. And, one of those biggest influences came when I was in undergrad. I played at Furman University and, going into my senior year, actually I was in the weight room when, it happened, but I kind of had a bad back injury that kind of took me out for, at least 6+ months. And, during that time I was doing a lot of rehab just to try to get back and, because it's coming up on my senior season. And, obviously, I wanted to finish out strong. And, obviously going through injury is hard and it can be a tough time and, definitely mentally challenging in a lot of areas. But, the one person that was, on my side, had my back, pretty much that whole entire time was, my strength and conditioning coach, David Abernathy. He was there with me every step of the way, make sure I had everything that I needed, during that time. And, I rehabbed healthy and got back and, I was able to play every game of my senior year, just because of, all of the dedication and, the work that, he helped put into me. And then, obviously like there was work on my end that had to be done as well. But, he was a super positive light, in my whole journey there, my whole experience. And, he was a big, part of the reason of, why I wanted to become a strength coach, because I was like, if, he can have this much of an impact on me in this small amount of time, which is, only 4 years, then, what type of impact could I have on, many kids and, coming up that was, have very similar stories and backgrounds to, kind of what I've been through. And even if they're a little bit different, we're all more of the same than we are different. So that was one of the biggest things, that I, kind of, wanted to get into this profession for, was just because of, how much of an impact that he had on me and just the amount of impact that I could have on others, doing the same type of work.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us. and I didn't know that it was that you'd gotten injured. That was before you had the two sacks. You had two sacks that year, huh? You had one against UCF and one against VMI, I think.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So that was actually, so in the UCF game, I actually had turf toe too. So like they had gave me a whole carbon fiber foot plate, tape my four toes together, and then I had the big toe just kind of like hanging by itself. But sometimes you got to play through injury. But yeah, it was definitely during, like, right before that, all of that happened. That was the time where I was like, working to get back.
Awesome. That is good. All right. So, what are the foundational principles that you build your coaching philosophy on?
Yeah, I think there are obviously a lot of different traits that I think that really make a good coach, and make a good coach great. But just a couple of things that that one that has nothing to do with training right off the rip is one, you got to have a certain type of energy, and it's got to be positive energy, because those guys, when when you come into a room, they can feel the type of energy that you're giving off, and on any given day, no matter where they're at, effort wise in the headspace, like they might be 80%, 85%. I think the type of mentality and the energy that you bring every day as a coach, you can get about 10% or more out of those guys. So like you can get a guy from 90 to 100. If he's given 100, you can give him the 110. You can give him to get that extra, and that's just by the energy and the aura that you bring into a room. So I definitely think energy is definitely one. Two, you got to have urgency in everything that you do. Just being quick to help. Obviously moving around with a lot of energy. Obviously you don't want to have any type of lethargic energy around those guys, because they can sniff it, they can see it right away. And if you're bouncing around and you're leading the way, and you're quick to do things, and you're quick to help, or you're quick to be about action, those guys will follow. They pick up a great deal from what they see you do. So I think urgency is you definitely have to have that in that realm. And then number three is detail. And we all can talk about what detail looks like, but at the end of the day, it's standing on everything that you want to have in a program, and making sure that it's right, and make sure that it's done the right way. Because if everything is disorganized and there's no detail about anything, and like I said, the guys can notice that too. And if they notice things aren't on point, or if things aren't the way that you say they're supposed to be, then how are they ever going to trust and listen to what you're saying? So I mean, you got to have that certain type of detail. When you bring in anything to those guys, you got to have detail in your coaching. So that that definitely plays a big part of my coaching philosophy. And I like to think that a lot of people talk about the type of people that they had coaching them when they were younger, and you want to you would like to be that guy for those guys that you would have wanted to have as a coach. But I also would think too that there's sometimes we all have egos, and people want the ego stroke. Well, I think the biggest thing too is just keeping it real, keeping it 100% authentic. Even if it's something that they don't want to hear, they're going to be much more grateful in the long run if you just give them the clear-cut truth, because it's going to help them out. And as long as you're coming from a great place, then it's all going to be great, at the end of the day. So energy, urgency, detail, and authentic.
Okay. Who's been your biggest influence in your career?
I won't say like there's this one person that's had the biggest influence. There are multiple people that have helped me along the way that I picked up a ton of things from. But just going off the top, like I said, David Abernathy was he was my head strength coach in undergrad, and then I got to be around you for an extended period of time, and you had a lot of influence on the way that I came up as a young coach. You, Jake Riedel, Jeremy Jacobs, all of those guys, like, on that staff that, really had a huge impact on, how I came up as a coach. And then, Ben Hilgard, he's our director now here at Boise State. And he has been awesome to me. Took me in as a young coach, he kind of gave me my first opportunity. And, he is the epitome of, just leadership and poise and culture. So he's definitely influenced me a ton, and really given me a lot of things to put into my bank, and all of you guys have, and it's just been I've been so fortunate to be able to learn from such great people.
Yeah, a lot, really a lot of them. So moving on to this next one, which has a lot to do with this. I get asked all the time for advice on career advancement and what are some of the things that I look for when I look at young coaches' resumes. What did your journey look like? And what did you do to get to the position that you're in now at Boise State?
Yeah, so I would start with, obviously, like I told you before, I was at Furman, and I got done playing, so I was a true freshman, and so I only had 4 years. So in my spring semester of my senior year, I was still, I wouldn't say I was lost, but I was still, kind of, wondering exactly like kind of what I wanted to do, kind of how I wanted to get into it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of talks with our strength coach, and he was like, "Man, you were one of our best leaders on our team. You would be really good if you got into this." And I got my degree in exercise science, and I always loved this stuff, and the game of football has given me a ton. So just kind of looking back on it, I was like, I can marry the two together and really be right where I want to be. So, and I asked him, I was like, "Well, coach, can I stay and just intern under you?" And he was like, "Absolutely not." And at first I was like, "Wait, like why not? Like I'm here."
I
I'm
can
ready to
hear
work.
Coach Abernathy saying that too.
Yeah, he was like, "Absolutely not." He was like, "You've been in our program for 4 years. Like, you've seen what I do. You need to go get your own experiences, make your own connections."
That's awesome.
And he was like, "I got a friend down the road at, University of South Carolina, and I can see you right up the road." And so, right after I graduated, took my graduation money, subleased an apartment for the summer, and then moved to Columbia with Jeff Dillman and his staff, over at the Gamecocks. And, that's kind of how I got my start. And it's crazy because, the model that they had as, just a program as far as like having interns in the strength department, there were 1 million of us.
Yeah, there were. Yeah.
I know in my class there were 18 people that were signed up to intern, and it was kind of crazy. Like I said, it was a lot of, looking back on it, it was a lot of controlled chaos, that was kind of going on because there were a lot of people that needed to be managed, right? Obviously, like they got all of their guys that they have to account for, and then you got 20 plus people that's outside of the program that's new that they have to also kind of oversee and try to develop. So, there were a lot of moving parts going on during that time, but that time to me was invaluable. I learned the value of, really just, if you want to stand out in a group that's that big, it's not about how loud you are, about what you're saying. It's really about what you're doing, your action, and trying to be the first one, in the door.
Yeah.
Just trying to see things before they happen, anticipate, being proactive, and then when you're given a task, make sure that it's done right now with that urgency and to the utmost degree. And over the course of the summer, I started getting a little bit more responsibility, that Coach Dillman that entrusted me with. And he told me, my first couple of weeks, he was like, "Hey man, like, you got something about you, that you really can continue to build off of, but you just have to continue to lock in, focus, and obviously you got to grow up, and I was young. I had just got done playing. I had just graduated, so I definitely had like a young mentality, when it came to those type of things. But as I started to grow and develop in that summer, I learned a lot just by like I said, just being proactive and all of those things. So during the course of my time there, towards the end, I was kind of looking to expand my horizon as far as training goes. So obviously I had played football, and I thought the best way and I had talked to a couple of different people that had been in the field, and I thought the best way for me to move forward was to try to get, more experience coaching an array of different people, not just this specific population of football, but, getting to train women athletes, getting to train athletes that are not
Exactly.
tailored to football, just so you can really hone that scope in on, what training can look like for different groups of people. So I sat down and talked to Coach Dillman one day, and he said, hey, I got some connections over at LSU, and, I can get you over there on the Olympic side. And so he hit up Coach Mel for me, and then talked to Coach Mel for a little bit, and, she was awesome. And, she brought me in right away. So it went even 2 weeks. I packed my car up and drove all the way to BR from Columbia, and, was at LSU on that side with, Melissa and Greg Golden and Chris White, those three people. And, they were awesome. Like, all three of them together all had different styles, and they all had different teams and their approach to how they coached. And, I learned a lot just, getting to be hands-on. Like, they let us do a lot of things that were hands-on, especially after, they got to trusting us and, different things like that. It was, an experience that was one to none. And, still super grateful for those guys and, kind of helped me get to where I'm at today. But, and then obviously that's when, I kind of ran into you and your staff on the other side. And I'll never forget.
Stowed you away.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I'll never forget that you told Coach Mel, you was like, yeah, it's time for him to come. It's time for him to go. So I moved over to you guys' side, and, we had a really good intern class, with Jordan and all those guys. And, like I said, you had a really, really good coaching staff that, really taught me a lot as far as, just a lot of different things. We can get into that later, but just being with you guys kind of helped me out a lot. And then that's when, I started to apply for different graduate assistant spots because I knew that was going to be kind of my next step. And then I accepted a graduate assistant position to Mercer University, which is in Macon, Georgia, working with football. And I had a couple other sports that I was in charge of. So, went over to Macon, and I was only there for 3 months. And, and then you called me, and he was like, hey, there's a position open at Virginia Tech. And, I had a guy that, worked for me back in the day, and they're looking for a guy. And, I always want to know if you would be interested because I think you'd be the perfect guy for the job. And, man, Coach, I was extremely grateful to, hear from you. And, I went on an interview there at Virginia Tech, and, I remember Coach Hiergard telling me, right after I got out the car before I left my interview, he was like, tell me, he's like, I'm really nervous because, you're so young. I had just turned 24 years old, still a young guy. And he's like, tell me why. He's like, is this going to be a good idea if I hire you? And I'll never forget when I got out the car, I was like, Coach, this will be the best decision you ever make. And I won't let you won't regret it. And, he took that word with him. And about a week later, he called me. So I was, moving to Blacksburg. And then, got to Blacksburg and just really, dug my way into the, I was just a sponge. I didn't know anything. I was super raw. Obviously learned a lot from my internship experience, but, getting in that first time,
it's a little different when they're paying you.
Absolutely. When you're a full-time guy, it's going to be, the experience is going to be a little bit different. So, but all of those things that I had learned along the way of, my internship experience and all of those things, like once I got to Virginia Tech, to be completely honest, like, everything that I had learned and ingrained, it made it easy. Obviously it wasn't just really easy, but those things that I had, those things that I had done, it made it really easy to
you were prepared
to be able to handle the task that I was given. And over the time, I was just, entrusted with more responsibility. And, I was able to just learn a ton and, like I said, just work hard and be a sponge. And the next thing you know, after 3 years, and, kind of stuff happens in the industry here and there. And you get, sometimes you stay at a place for a long time. Sometimes you get let go, depending on obviously how well you do. And at the end of 2021, unfortunately, our staff got broken up because our head coach got let go. So, I had to find a new home. And Good old Coach Neighbors. Good old Coach Neighbors, baby. He, gave me an opportunity to come, work with him at Louisiana, and that was a great experience. And all of the things that I had learned from, all those years, we got to implement, at UL, and we tried a lot of new things, and we learned a ton from each other. We were, just pushing each other to be the best, like all of us on this staff, and
great staff, staff,
awesome staff. And then, towards the end of last year, Coach Hillgard, he ended up calling me back, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to Boise State, and I would like for you to come up with me, because you're the most trusted guy that I trust to do the job, and I know we're gonna get it done here." So, obviously he gave me my first opportunity, and I definitely owe him a lot, and I wanted to give that back and continue to build with him. So I ended up accepting the job to come to Boise.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the journey, and it was a long journey, and but it's honestly it's felt like it's going by pretty quick. But it's definitely been a little bit longer than I would have thought.
Yeah, but you made like this kind of like this circle kind of thing, from job to job. But that's what you have to do, I tell young coaches all the time that unfortunately today internships are almost mandatory if you want to be a collegiate strength coach. I mean, it's just, it's the field is so competitive today compared to the way it was in the 80s and the early 90s. It's a competitive field. And a lot of times it simply boils down to the person that wants it the most. And isn't that the way everything is in athletics to some degree?
Yeah.
Every game, every match, everything in athletics, in my opinion, boils down because everyone is skilled. It doesn't at this level. Every person you encounter is skilled at their task, and it boils down to the people who want it the most. And
right.
You obviously wanted it a lot to make those travels. And you know what? There were people that started before you and that have started since you started that have said, you know what? I just don't want it that bad.
Right.
And they're good people. And they've probably got great jobs now. But it takes a lot to get to where you are. So let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've learned during that journey that help you today? Is there anything that just sticks out?
Yeah, I would say, really the biggest thing to me, and, I kind of live on this principle regardless, but, just being, in my experience, it kind of reaffirms everything for me. Just being great and being good to, everybody and anybody that you encounter, no matter the role, position, the place that they may hold in an organization. I'm talking about to the janitor that walks into the door, to the head coach that you see, everybody is, just as important, because at the end of the day, you got to know that you're dealing with people. And, me, just like I said, just being really good to people, it'll always come back full circle somehow, and I'm not saying every relationship is transactional, but, there's going to become a point where, you're going to need people and people are going to need you at the same time. So, and you're going to be much more willing to give back and help, those that have helped you and vice versa, just being great to everybody that you come by. Like I said, that'll always come full circle, no matter, what time or what point in your life that may happen. It's definitely going to come back. I wholeheartedly believe that, and this happened to me numerous of times, throughout my journey. And honestly, one thing, like I said, when it comes to coaching, is nothing is too big or too small to do, and no matter what role you have. So, I could be the intern, or I could be the head strength coach, and when it's time to set up, I'm definitely going to be the first person I'm going to be helping the intern set up. When it's time to clean up, I'm going to be the one that's on the floor. I'm helping them clean up as well. I just think there are certain things that, during the course of my short career so far, that I've seen, that I learned, and I've gained respect for, a lot of people that are not too big to do small things, because, it just shows that, you're not bigger than, everybody else that's around you. And, you kind of garner respect from, the people that look up to you, and, the people that's, above you as well. You garner that respect. So, that's definitely one of the biggest things that I've kind of taken away from, just my journey and in that aspect.
Good deal. I appreciate that. So we're going to take a short break right here from the podcast and talk about our friends at ThermoPack and the ThermoPack Mouse Shield. And I've seen this. This is pretty cool. So the ThermoPack Mouse Shield was developed to assist athletic trainers, coaches, parents, and athletes by identifying potentially life-threatening heat-related dangers on the field in real time, while also absorbing damaging forces to the teeth and the jaw. In addition to protecting an athlete's teeth and jaw from damaging impacts, the ThermoPack Mouse Shield utilizes thermotechnology by changing colors as oral temperature reaches 102, and it's a fact. I actually tested it myself. This innovative feature serves as an effective check engine light for athletes, affording them the opportunity to slow down, cool down, and quickly return to the field, minimizing the loss of critical practice and/or game time. For more information or to purchase your own, contact ThermoPack by going to thermopack.com. Again, that is thermopack.com. Okay, now back to the podcast. Thank you, Brad, for your patience there. All right, so let's talk some nuts and bolts, okay? So what does your role now at Boise State look like?
Yes, sir. So I'm in charge of, all of our field work programming as it relates to speed and change direction. So everything that we do on the field, that pertains to that, I'm in charge of, programming it, teaching staff how we're going to implement it, and then, bring the strategy to life on the field, with the setup and, with who's coaching what, who's where. So I'm in charge of, really heading up that whole deal on the field with our program. And then I also do, our GPS stuff as well. So we have stat sports here. I'm in charge of data collection and downloading that stuff for us so that we can use to, also help tailor our programming and stuff like that.
So now, when did this start? Did this start while you were at Virginia Tech or when you went to Lafayette?
Yeah, so towards the end of my time at Virginia Tech, and honestly, really, it was COVID that kind of kickstarted this whole deal. So, during that time, you were only supposed to be allowed, how many guys at a time in the room, and because of the quarantine, the social distancing, and all of that stuff. But we kind of got lucky. So at Virginia Tech, what we did with our summer programming that year was we took the racks from the weight room and we put them into the indoor. And one wall of our indoor was just full of garage doors. So we had to open all of them up, and it was considered an open air space. And so we were allowed to put racks in the indoor. That way we can still train efficiently and not have to have, 10, 20 groups a day trying to get our guys in. So the way we structured it was we had like 6 racks in one end zone, 6 racks at the 50, 6 racks on the far end. And, that was far enough apart where, the guys could come in and get their work, at the rack and on the field at the same time, because we also had, obviously, like I said, the racks were in the indoor. So we still had a whole bunch of indoor space to warm up. And then we also had our outdoor practice field that was right on the other side of those garage doors as well. So, during that time, it was fortunate. It was only 4 people on our staff at that time, and the way we were able to be efficient with the training was Coach Hildegard just entrusted, one group of the team to each coach, and you were in charge of running your speed program with that group and taking them through their resistance training also. So during that summer, I was in charge of all the DBs, wide receivers, and that group alone. I took those guys and, I coached them through every single thing that we had in our program that day. The full warm-up, all of the speed things, getting into the weight room, coaching through everything, every single day of the summer. And so that was kind of the start of, like I said, me really getting that hands-on experience, learning, creating that coaching eye, different things like that. And then the next year, I was in charge of, creating our developmental plan for our developmental guys and our freshmen, so our incoming freshman guys. I also developed their entire summer plan, weight training, and their on-the-field stuff as well. So I was able to, kind of implement a lot of the things that I had learned and had been learning, throughout the course of my time there.
So you worked at it. You just kept working at it.
Yes, sir, and did a really good job. And then once I got to UL with Coach Neighbors, we bounced a lot of ideas off each other. And then, he let me take the reins on, all of our speed work there. And, obviously it was a big collaboration. Yeah. But for the most part, I was heading that deal up, as far as all the on the field, change direction, speed work at UL. And now I'm in the same type of role here.
Yeah. Would Bonesaw get fired up?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he might be fired up right now as we speak.
He's fired up right now.
No, he's always fired up, and he's always bringing the absolute most juice. And he definitely he regards a lot of his staff. He wants his staff to be the exact same way, and we're all in there on fire. Every day.
As a all-time LSU strength and conditioning member of the all-time strength and conditioning team, that says a lot. There were, those people that made that list, and I'm not the one who made that list. That list was there before I got there. I mean, those guys were coached by some of the greatest of all time in this industry. And to have a guy like Connor Neighbors tell you that he wants to be a strength coach, because I knew the competitor he was on the field. And when that guy told me he wanted to be a strength coach, my heart went pitter-patter. I said, okay, we can work with that. So, yeah, that's cool. All right. So so just tell us your philosophy on sprinting and speed development. Lay it out.
Yeah. I guess I got to start with just saying, like, the biggest thing to me when you look at just speed development as a whole, as, first, I feel like, definitely as a holistic approach to training, you have to train, all of the buckets, that create the entire athlete, so you got to build up their work capacity, right? You got to develop their strength. You have to develop power, and all of those things encompassing together. So you're able to withstand the forces that allow you to actually sprint fast. Mm-hmm. So like I said, first, I think that's the biggest thing is, speed development is one, it's a holistic approach to training. And when you think about Charlie Francis's, vertical integration, he talks about, how, you're able to train all of those qualities, at one time, but, there might be some parts of the year where, there are going to be some things that are going to be more emphasized than others. Mm-hmm. And so kind of how I look at it, and, obviously with football and the off-season training, leading up to preseason, you have your winter time, you have the big block in the winter before spring ball. And then you also have, a little bit of time right after spring ball. And then you get into summer training, and then you got that big block as well. So as it pertains to, our programming in football, I kind of see it as, you can train two qualities as it relates to speed, right? You got acceleration, you got max velocity. In the early winter time, in the first couple of weeks of winter, right, the biggest thing is, you're going to be working on, one is going to be a lot of high volume things as you're working on work capacity and different things like that, but also as it pertains to acceleration, right? You really can work a lot of technical things, giving the guys concepts of acceleration. So they're actually able to pick up and learn like the position and the posture, the projection that is actually needed, to be able to excel properly. And then you pair that together with some heavy resisted runs early, which is going to influence their early acceleration, which, 0 to 5, 0 to 10 yards, and as they start to pick those things up and you get later on into, the winter program, spring, late spring, right? And you can start transitioning then that to, medium, some moderate loads on some resisted running, and some longer late ACL, right before they start to rise up and transition, the 10 to 15 yard marker. And, I kind of see that as like kind of the early block of training where it's going to be a lot of technicality. And like I said, kind of building those buckets, like say because anywhere on that strength curve, you add load to it, right? And you're going to be, working in that zone. So obviously like early, you're working on the absolute strength, work capacity type deals, right? And that's going to influence that early acceleration. So kind of pairing all of that stuff together, great weight room and field. And as you transition into the summertime, after they, kind of built all of those things up over time with the technicality and, learning the context of acceleration, then, you can really start off with the acceleration, late ACL, 10 to 15 yards. And then and then you can start blending some of that max velocity work as well, where they're getting into the 20 plus, it's going to be a little bit less technical, more performance based on that side, medium to light on the resisted runs. Maybe it's a chain sprint or, something light for a longer volume, and over a period of time, like I said, those guys are going to be able to hit those velocities, more. And you can get into different things, especially in that max velocity where they're really gaining some context with, dribbling, speed dribbling, whether it's wickets, some fly runs where they're really able to get the concept down and running at max speed. And then, obviously like the later stages would be, now you're putting the whole thing together where they're whether from a 3-point or some type of start, where they're transitioning from an ACL, transitioning right into the max velocity. And it's a true, build up run. So I think, like I said, just kind of looking at it in that scope of the spectrum, like I said, wintertime being, early to late ACL, then you get to the summertime, you're still working acceleration, and then you're also working that max velocity as well. And it's definitely going to be different for different position groups as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were talking, I heard you say projection. And, that's kind of a new term for us old strength coaches. We had different, as a football coach, you would always tell the guy, come out of your hips. Mm-hmm. And then as a strength coach, you would use a phrase like triple extension.
Yep.
But I really like hip projection or shoulder projection, whichever projection you're talking about. I like that terminology much better. And for an old guy to learn something new, that's pretty cool because I like that. Some of the old, like I was talking to in an earlier podcast today, I was talking to someone about teaching the snatch. And I learned an exercise that I learned many, many years ago was called drop snatch. But now that's called pressing snatch balance or snatch balance.
Yeah.
It's the same exercise. It's just got a different name on it.
Right.
And so Nordic leans, they were called Russian leans.
Russian
so
leans,
I don't know. I don't know who did them first, the Nordics or the Russians, but I learned Russian leans. So when I heard you say hip or projection, I wanted to comment on that because I think it gives you more of a visual cue that you're projecting out. And that's critical in a person's start and acceleration, that projection and versus triple extension or coming out of your hips. So coming out of your hips, explode, none of those in my mind give me the same cueing that projection does. And I like that.
Right. No, it's definitely a good cue, to use because, like you said, those guys can kind of visualize a projection. Like projection,
Yeah,
you
I'm
think of
going
projection,
that
you're thinking,
way.
right, you're thinking out. And so when you say that, those guys think that because sometimes when you do say, come out of your hips or get that triple extension, those guys' first tendency is to pop
Just
straight up.
stand up. Yeah.
Right. And, in that initial part of the acceleration, right, we're trying to be slow to rise. So, if I'm telling them to project out and, like I said, be slow to rise, right, those guys are going to, really project the shoulders, the hips forward. I try to tell them, honestly, I try to tell my guys on their starts to, like, let's see if we can get our hip to clear yard. And that really gets those guys, really projecting out on the first, couple steps in that acceleration.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that cue. I heard it not long ago for me. It's like a long time ago. But I heard it not long ago, and I like that. So, all right. So, obviously, technique and sprinting technique is really important. How much time and effort do y'all put into that?
I think there's definitely a lot of time spent on, teaching the detail of the technique, because the biggest thing is when you're teaching these guys, how to sprint properly or how to get in certain positions that's going to help them, be a better sprinter. You're talking about injury resiliency, to the highest degree, because, obviously with, pelvic positioning and, the leg swing and different things like that, especially once you get into, max velocity, those are a lot of forces, coming down in those lower limbs. And, if you misstep once, and, putting force down in the wrong direction at the wrong time, those are injuries that are going to occur. And, you obviously know a coach as a football strength coach, the worst thing that can happen is a guy get hurt on your watch. Like, you never want a guy to get hurt, on your watch, right? Especially, in the eyes of the football coaches. So the biggest thing is keeping these guys healthy. And, technique to me is it's a big part of, keeping these guys injury resilient as it comes to, sprinting. I think technique is huge.
Yeah. What kind of concessions do you make for the guys that play the different positions? Do you do a lot of different stuff, or is it similar?
Yeah. So how I kind of look at it is, I put the guys in honestly just two buckets really. You have your big guys, so your edge players on the D line, your interior D linemen, O linemen, and some of your heavier tight ends, right? They're going to be in, kind of that one bucket. And honestly, those guys, in my mind, they're only going to be working on, that short acceleration phase and, the late ACL phase. We might touch some long runs with them, but for the most part, they're staying in those two, ranges, because most of the game for them is played in that box, right? And the more efficient accelerator that I can make those guys, if they can get from point A to point B in less time, then I'm making some headway with those guys. So like I'm keeping those guys kind of in that box per se. And then, for our smaller guys, like, our skill guys, DBs, receivers, they're going to do it all, right? They're going to do, early ACL to max velocity. And, we're going to work extensive to intensive and simple to complex. And it's, the way, I would look at programming it is just, we'll start pretty simple, and it's going to be how much can these guys learn and get down and do efficiently before we're able to move on to the next deal. Because obviously there are going to be certain things that I'm going to want to move on to, but if our guys are not getting it down, then we're just going to stay there. We might progress, some intensity a little bit, by maybe adding some weight or, making them do a different type of drill that has a little bit different context to it. But, the concept that they have to get down, we're going to stay right at that point until they're able to pick it up. And then once they are, then we can move on. And so, I always see the program as, it's always going to be free flowing. Like nothing is ever set in stone. It's a plan,
Yeah.
But the plan can always change. The plan can always be adapted. So
yeah. How do y'all use GPS to help?
Yeah, so honestly, like the biggest thing when it comes to that side of things is, really look. First, we get a max velocity on every guy, so kind of knowing where everybody's max speed is, and then we're able to like put percentages based off of the ranges of those guys' max velocity. So we don't have a 1080 that we can, actually go in and program like resisted runs and different things like that to the 1080 for those guys. And we don't have timing gates either. So, there are some things that we're limited on, but
Yeah.
there are some things that are pretty simple that work, and that's easy. So like I said, we get a max velocity on all of those guys, and me working with these yard markers, 0 to 5, 0 to 10, 0 to 15, at 5, 10, 15 yards, I would like to see these guys at, a certain percentage of their max velocity, whether it's 0 to 5 and they're going to be at 82 to about 85%, or as they get to 10, it increases about 87% on their velocity. And as they get into 15, 20, most of your guys are going to be, 90% and above at 20 yards. And even your bigger guys, I mean, they might be max speed at 20 yards, right?
I know some. Yeah. I know some that were max speed at 5 yards.
Yeah, I would say so. It's just, and sometimes that's all they got, Coach.
Yeah, I know. They're grinding coffee, man, but they're trying as hard as they can. Yeah.
No doubt, but those are kind of things that we'll kind of look at, and I am live tracking, so I have the iPad outside with us.
That's awesome.
And I'm able to see, if those guys are hitting those speeds, and obviously I'm able to tailor some things if we're not getting exactly what we need to during that time. So.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in live tracking, and a lot of people don't do it. They don't mark their periods, but I don't see how you properly use any technology, especially GPS technology, without marking the periods and tracking it live. It gives you a whole nother perspective on what you're having them do and which periods have the greatest demand, and which periods, like when you start breaking it down, there are certain periods, and you couldn't tell a football coach this, but there are periods that you could label technical. There are periods where you could label tactical, and then there are periods where you could label as very sports specific. But there's some periods like goal line. There were more high intensity decelerations in a goal line period. It was like, and I remember we did a report because we were getting guys banged up in goal line. So we did a report, and I want to say in a 10-minute goal line period that we historically would do every training camp, there were like, it was like a 40 or 50% increase over what was actually, no, it was more than that. I think it was like 3 times more than what actually occurred in a football game, in an entire football game. And then, other periods you look and it's not even close to what occurs. You're underworking, guys aren't doing anything. Now that would be either a very technical period, or you could be discussing something very tactically. But as far as the scope of how that transfers to the game, it doesn't do that. So I always liked tracking our practices live. I got a lot out of that. And I'm glad to hear that you do that.
Oh yeah. I think it's very important to, it's like you said, like you have to know like which periods are going to give them, the most load, which ones are the most intense. And in that way, we're able to plan for it, especially in the off season when we kind of know what these guys are going to be, withstanding, during the practice or, during a different type of session.
Yeah. All right. So that leads us to this next question. With football coaches having so much more time with their athletes now compared to the old days, Are there adjustments that you guys make to training to make sure that they're getting what they need, both on the field and in the weight room?
Yeah. I mean, and obviously, it's crazy to even start to think about how much time that these coaches are actually, able to have with these guys now.
Yeah.
And if you're not trying to burn the candle on both ends, you have to make sure that, you're doing right, by your guys. And that's where our live tracking came into play a lot in the summertime because, on Mondays, they would be with us solely. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they had, it was like a mini practice that they would have with the coaching staff on top of the player run practice that they do after the coaches leave. And that's already an hour of time, that they have that's not programmed by us. So if we're not programming it, then we need to see exactly, okay, what are they doing? And, once we actually kind of see the numbers on what they're doing, then we can kind of tailor what we need to do, as far as our conditioning session or running session that was going to be on the field that day before we bring them into the weight room, So, like I said, there are definitely a lot of different things that you have to take into account. And even, there was one day where, we had the guys out there and the coaches are smashing them.
Yeah.
And, we planned on doing repeat sprintability on that day. And I mean, the guys are like, damn near walking off the field. They're dragging, So at that point, you just kind of, okay. Yeah. But you look at the GPS and you can see how much high speed running that they got. And they actually got a decent amount during that time that we actually needed them to get. So it's like, okay, look, well, we can actually just go ahead and take it to the weight room and get what we kind of need to that way.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have known that if you would have waited, and downloaded those bugs, 2 hours later and slept on it and got up the next morning and looked at it, you wouldn't have known that. So that's why I think live tracking is so very important. You have the technology, so what it's like going into the weight room and turning your velocity-based tracking system on and not logging in any exercises. You're just lifting, and I'm sure there are people who do that just turn it on and just let it go, and everybody lifts and you just look at the numbers and you're not tracking anything. Right. But just like tracking with GPS, when you track every exercise, and it only takes a minute, track every exercise, and then when you look at the CSV file, it looks just like GPS data. I mean, there's so much there for you to look at that you wouldn't even know it exists without tracking everything. And that's how we did it. We tracked everything so that whether we needed it or not, we still tracked it just in case we needed it. If I had a question or one of our other staff members had a question about something, I would say, let's look at the perch stuff. And sure enough, there it was. We had it. So
right.
I believe in tracking that stuff and looking at it while you're doing it so that you have that information and you're able to utilize it. What about, you talked earlier about communication and the relationships that are so important with the people that you work with. What about with the athletes? Does that, it's important that you communicate well with the custodians and the ladies in the cafeteria and the football staff, the secretaries. It's also important that you have a great relationship with your student athletes. So can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. Obviously, like the biggest reason that, we all get into this is, well, at least I hope is, it's for the kids, right? It's for the guys. And what we have to realize about, like I said, this is a business of dealing with people. And what we have to realize is that, when dealing with people, everybody that you come in contact with, they're going to be different. Yeah. Some are going to be more similar than different, but everybody's going to have a different personality type, different communication style, the way that they receive information is going to be, different from, the next person or the next person. So, when you are, number one, when you're trying to build relationships with people, you got to be able to perceive, what type of person that you're dealing with and what they're going to respond well to. Obviously, like, everybody has their base personality, their baseline, to where if you sit in a room by yourself, right, then you can be however you want to be because you're by yourself. But as soon as you get to dealing with people, right, now it's time to tailor your style to, what they may need. You might have to tailor your style of communication to what they might need. And just being able to really do that with different guys, and how you relate information to them, how you coach them, how they receive feedback, whether it's negative or positive. Because as you know, there's some guys that, they might need for you to dog cuss them and get on them, and really they need that hard motivation for them to get going. And you might talk to another guy that way and he'll shut down, or you'll talk to another guy that way and then they might get aggressive. So, you have to really, one, talk to your players, and, I'm talking about really build authentic relationships with them, spend time with them, sit down with them, communicate with them, like try to get to know them, where they come from, why they are the way they are. And then once you start to understand all of those things, then you really understand how to communicate with them on that level. And obviously, once you're able to communicate with them on that level, then the buy-in is going to come. That's where the trust comes in, right? That's where the trust comes in. That's where the buy-in comes in. And because your program that you program, like, it doesn't mean anything if them guys don't believe in what you're saying and what you're going to do for them. And if they know that you have their back, then they'll do anything for you, right? And like I said, it really comes down to intent and execution. Yeah. And the intent and execution will be there 1,000%. Yeah. If, you have all those things, you have that buy-in, but that comes from, knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to create those relationships with those guys. And, I like to think that, I definitely have a unique relationship with a lot of our guys on our team. And it's fun being able to coach those guys because of, how much they want to communicate. They want feedback. And, also it's being able to give them information as well, right? Like, in this generation now, information is paramount. They have everything to their disposal. They can go look up anything, see anything, have an opinion on like that, damn near everything, right? Yeah. So, they want to know why, and, you better be able to explain to them why you're doing something and how it's going to help them. Because as soon as they know that, everything else is key. Yeah.
Amen. All right. So I know we're running out of time. This is probably the most important question of them all, is what was your first impression of the blue football field?
I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, obviously, as a kid, when I was, living in, Alabama, I'm watching.
There's
football.
No blue football fields in the whole state of Alabama.
No doubt. I'm hearing about Boise State, and then I see the field. I'm like, that is a crazy field to play on. Like, that's one of the only color fields in the nation. And then, it's kind of crazy that, I get hired here and I walk out there for the first time, and I was almost blinded because, like, the sun was hitting it, and then, like, that color blue, just like when the sun is hitting it, you barely can see. It's like, you can just fall down.
It's blue. Yeah.
That's how blue it is. Like, it's pretty cool, but it can get kind of tricky. Even like when our opponents play us on it and we wear all blue, it's kind of trippy.
I bet when you're sitting there watching it and your team is in all blue, it's got to be kind of crazy watching it.
Right. No, it definitely is.
And you're like, here I am coaching at a place that's got a blue football field. This is amazing. No, but I tell you what, I think it's pretty cool. I was always intrigued by it, but because it's so different, it's one of those things that is so outlandishly different that it's pretty cool. So I like it.
No, well, I like it.
Yeah, unfortunately, our time is up. I'd like to talk longer, but I know that you've got to go, and this is my second podcast for today too. So
no
I'm ready to go. So, but I really do appreciate your time. This was a great talk. I loved talking to you about the sprinting and speed development and how you're live tracking the GPS and stuff. So I appreciate you being on here. Good luck to you guys for the rest of the season. I know that, y'all are playing your butts off and you still got a lot to play for. So good luck. Tell everyone there that I said good luck as well. You can follow Coach Mentor on X, or that's Twitter for the people that haven't made the shift yet, at Coach Mentor _, and that is capital COACH, capital MINTER _. And on Instagram at Brad Mentor _. So get him on X at Coach Mentor _. Look him up on Instagram at Brad Mentor _. This brings us to the end of today's podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this one as much as I did. And I enjoy them all. That's why I do it. But it's really good to sit and visit with someone that you've known since they first got into this industry and to see how they've grown. So it was super cool being here today. For more information about all the Moffitt Method speed, strength, and conditioning programs, please visit us on Instagram and X, or our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.